realize that it's on and live, but we'll get started. All right. So back to our Friday Night Lives. For those of you that may be new, we do these at Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S. Eastern Time. Tonight, we are here live with, I'm probably going to say it wrong again, but Marquin.
Yep.
Marquin Smith. And he has moved. He has been an analyst for several years and has moved into a data engineer role this past year. And he's going to tell us about his journey. And Marquin, I'm going to give you a chance to tell everybody about yourself, and we'll get started.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. So my name is Marquin. I'm a practicing data engineer down here in Australia. Currently working for Woolworths, which is probably the biggest supermarket chain down here in Australia. So I transitioned in February, so been a data engineer for about 8 months now, but I have actually worked in data for, I think, a little over a decade now, so primarily as an analyst. I've looked at data in all shapes and sizes over the years. I'll give a rundown of what I've done over the years. So in terms of schooling, I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics. That's my background, I guess. I always enjoyed maths because it was like, as long as you could kind of figure out the right answer, you got the full marks compared to some of the other subjects. So initially my first role was in media. So I've had quite a few media roles, so in media agencies, that is. So for people who might not know, I guess, what media agencies do, they're like companies that bridge between, let's say, companies who want to sell and like the media channels, so TV stations, radio stations. And I think their value prop is, instead of, if you're, let's say, Walmart, you don't have to go and deal with all the individual TV stations. You just say to the media agency, I want to buy this many ratings or whatever. And then the media agency has relationships with those, and they kind of take a lot of that work and do a lot of that legwork. So all you worry about really is creatives and that kind of stuff. Started in media way back in, I think it was 2008 now. But at that time, working with offline data. So it was, as I mentioned, TV ratings, newspaper circulations, and a lot of the work was trying to understand the role or the impact of a media campaign on a client's business. So they might share with you telephone calls, or some of them, I think, I'd set up analytics on websites. So that was quite new, relatively new at the time. Trying to understand that side of things, or even internal metrics like bookings as well. If we had a couple of travel clients, it's like, okay, if we push this campaign, like how many bookings did we drive and what does that look like? So that was my first role for a couple of years. What did the work look like? That was as a Excel jockey at that time.
Yeah. I think a lot of our first roles were working with Excel a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think at least the transition from university to first role was a bit tricky, because like in maths, I'm not sure if you know, like in English universities, what your degree is, you basically only do that subject. So I did 3 years of like all maths modules. There's like, I think in the US there's like core, you have to do some English, some in England it's just every module was maths.
Wow.
That's a bit of a difference there. But I was like, came out and I was like, okay, I've got my maths degree, I know MATLAB. You type that in the job search and not much comes up.
No.
No. So and as that in that media agency, learning Excel, I remember I was like, oh, I really want to keep this job and do well. Used to go home and read through the Excel help, like all the function descriptions and stuff, because I was like, oh, it seems like the tool to know.
Yeah.
And this was, I think, a little bit before YouTube as well, so there wasn't really YouTube tutorials on how to do things. So reading the manual was my go-to at the time. Well, no, it went well. Learned a lot. I learned, I guess, you don't necessarily need, well, at least looking back now, the storytelling piece of being an analyst is a quite a key component. And you can somewhat to some degree get away with not being too technical if you're able to convey a good story that tells a clear picture of what's happening. There I was like my first foray into automation was VBA, because there was this report I had to do every Monday, and I was like, and I was like, oh, surely there's a way of doing this. It's like working in Excel. Okay, how do you automate Excel? VBA, right? Stuff. So I tried to automate this report, and I took some sample data. I think I got it working with some sample data. Click go. I was like, okay, works. Plugged the whole data in, and I think I was waiting for maybe 45 minutes for it to complete, because I was doing I don't know. I was trying to do, I guess you call it a group by, but I was going through row by row in the Excel to pick out the different dimensions to aggregate. And once you get a few, I think tens of thousands. Anyway, it was a sizable data set for the time. And it just went to a crawl, and I was like, well, maybe go and get a coffee or whatever. But that was a good learning experience. And then actually following that wall is when I moved to Australia.
Okay.
And I guess I could see the trend in media so at that time, SEO was new, so search engine optimization, search SEM, search engine, I'm not sure, but the paid ads in search. Display advertising was quite new at that time. And I could see when you speak to people, they just had a lot of data to play with and optimize campaigns. So I was like, okay. When I got to here, Australia, I was like, okay, is this time to move to the digital side of things and stop focusing on the offline? So managed to find a role in a SEO agency. And here is where I kind of automated some reports as well. So this was at an SEO agency. A lot of their search engine optimization is kind of the art of what you can do on the website to rank higher in Google for stuff. So there's if you're position 1 in Google, you get I think substantially more traffic than if you're position 3. And if you're past 10 off the first page, then you
might as well forget it at that point. And SEO was a big thing back then too, because it was hot and it was not nearly as complicated even as it is today. And people got used to doing keyword stuffing and all this stuff like that. And then all of a sudden Google was like, no, we're not letting you do that anymore, and started dinging people for that. And so Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, all those
SEO
black hat
was hot.
tactics, white
Yeah.
writing on white backgrounds and stuff.
Yeah.
The things people think about. But no, I think well, Google in particular got smart around all of that stuff, as you said.
Yeah.
But I guess how an SEO agency is evaluated is how they can increase a particular company's rankings on certain search terms, and also how much traffic they're able to generate. So you might say, okay, you're ranking for these three, but we also recommend making these changes. So you're also ranked for these 10, hopefully, and then that results in more traffic. So,
and there's a lot of data and analysis that goes into figuring all that out, and yeah, I
so it's
imagine.
like, it's, there's a lot. So there was I'm not sure if it's still around. I'm sure it's morphed by now. Like SEO Mars was one. So they had, their business model was, you can sign up to them and then you say, okay, I want to monitor this list of, let's say, 10 keywords. So on their end, they had an automated system that would go to Google, type the keywords, and kind of almost save the positions of which domains are in which position. And then when you come in, let's say a couple of months, you can say, actually, for these, maybe you moved up. For these other keywords, maybe you moved down. And yeah, you can imagine the scale of that data if they're doing, I don't know, hundreds of keywords for each client, for Google and other search engines as well. That does end up being a lot of data on their end. But for my side, being an SEO analyst, the part that I had automated was the reporting using Google Analytics. So our clients would share Google Analytics logins. And I guess previous to the automation efforts, like that monthly reporting was all manual. And then implemented, I'm not sure if you'd come across it, there's like a Google Analytics plugin for Google Sheets.
Yeah.
So you can just say, okay, whatever report, these dimensions, these metrics, refresh it on the first of every month, let's say. And because I had already some good skills in Excel, or let's say more generally spreadsheets, once you've got the data in one tab, you can just select equals and then format it, and okay, poof, you've got a nice looking dashboard that automates each month.
Nice.
So that was pretty cool.
And then over time, like Google Analytics started migrating into like GA3 and GA4, and started having to use API. There's a lot of API connections and trying to use their APIs and pull data, and then I've dealt with all that too, and it's
a lot of parsing JSON in your past, Chris.
Because Google Analytics is the place to go when it comes to that website type data, and it's a couple of years ago when they migrated to GA4, it was a big thing.
Yeah, it is. There's I don't know if any budding consultants out there, like, okay, I'll maybe take the opportunity to talk about some GA4 now, a little bit of a detour, and we can come onto it later. But the microcosm is like Google Analytics previous to GA4, it did a lot, right? So they had, you put the tracking on your website, and Google basically took care of everything else. They took care of the interface, so let's say the reporting or even the dashboard. They took care of hosting your data. They took care of modeling your data. So all you had to do, let's say as a business, put a snippet on your website, and then you log into GA4, and there's all your data in Mood reports. But what they've done in the shift to GA4 is kind of, I'm going to say, unbundled all of that, or I guess created opportunity for others to add value, because let's say the GA4 interface hasn't been well received. Let's say people aren't too happy with the reporting options available in there. GA4 previously would just keep your data for as long as you have had the tracking on. GA4 now you only keep the data for, I think it's 14 months or so.
Yeah.
If you want to keep it longer, well, okay, they give you an option to export to BigQuery if you want to keep data for longer than that. And now you're kind of in the field of, okay, now I've got a huge table in a data warehouse that kind of needs maybe looking after, maybe some modeling, maybe some reporting build off it as well. So yeah, there's the unbundling's created some opportunities in the ecosystem there.
Definitely, yeah. Like you said, it great opportunity for some consultants to come in, and especially if you with that connection to BigQuery like that, if you are a good at GCP or have a lot of experience or some significant experience with BigQuery and GCP, then great opportunity to walk in as a analyst or an engineer and start kind of massaging that data into a format that could really be enhanced and reported off of. And then even if you're not really heavy into GCP, using their APIs, the GA4 APIs to pull data, and or there's applications out there like Stitch that will connect to GA4 and move the data. But the biggest opportunity I think is just that direct push to BigQuery. That's the easiest pathway to get it out of GA4, and I think the cleanest, right? I mean, it's just you're not having to parse as much. Everything's kind of being handled from that connector, and there's not as much manual work that has to be done from a data engineering perspective. But
no, I think it's like maybe 4 or 5 clicks, maybe input the data set where you want it to land or something.
Yeah.
And then it's very straightforward, which is good. But we can there's probably got a little bit more to say on that. But I'll continue my journey. So I was at the SEO agency for I think 7 months and then moved on. Because I think so what had happened was I came on board and then there was the opportunity to do the automation with the reporting. And then on the completion of that, there wasn't much more, I would say, data focused type work as I would like. And I had I like working with data. I mean, clearly working with data over 10 years, but I was like, okay, where's the opportunity for me to work with data? So I ended up leaving that business to a broader media agency again. Again, focused on digital data, kind of in the direct response side of things. So again, with campaigns, with let's say TV activity or digital activity as well, like what is that driving on the website? So a lot more website analysis. So are they driving conversions, signups, more traffic, and that kind of thing. So there was and I'd probably say my work there kind of split in two in terms of there was a macro view kind of analysis that you could do, or there's like a really detailed micro view that you could do on the digital. Yeah. So on the macro side, it was a lot of let's say linear regression to understand the contribution of each channel. So you might have overall from the business, the client might share overall sale volumes or something, and you have, or weekly sales volumes, let's say, and you have the weekly spend in TV, the weekly spend in digital display, radio, paid search. And then it's like, okay, how can you, there's one of the ultimate questions when the media says like, what's the optimal mix of media that you can buy, or I guess the converse is that how can I understand what the contribution of each of the channels are? So it's like one of the approaches is you can do a linear regression to understand what are the contributions of each of the channels on the sales figures. Yeah. Oh, well, maybe not a funny story, but an interesting thing that happened a few times was, okay, you get the brief. Okay, I want to understand the uh, the contribution of each. So that, okay, uh, what do you want to get out of it? Is that okay? I want the most accurate kind of prediction at the end because you're using this to model in the future.
Right.
So sometimes what can happen, because so a linear regression model has no concept of reality, right? So you can end up with let's say a negative coefficient for one of the channels. So what that means is by adding that channel, the model is saying that it's taking away sales,
Right.
but that just doesn't make sense logically, right?
Yeah.
But with that negative coefficient, you're getting the most accurate prediction of the sales value.
Yeah.
So like, okay, great, you've got the most accurate, and then someone will turn around. Okay, so if I plug these spends into each, like, what do I get? And it's like, well, this one's negative because you asked for most accurate. You didn't ask for like what makes the most sense, because there is in linear regression, there's an option to like lower bound the coefficients, and you can say the lower bound is 0.
Yeah.
But then in some instances, yeah, so you don't get the negative coefficient, but that can make the prediction less accurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, which one do you kind of go for? But that was the kind of macro view. So that was, I'd say, pulled out during sales pitch time, where it's like, look how well we understand your business and stuff, and also used a little bit ongoing to like say, okay, has anything shifted or making things worse? An interesting thing on that as well, you can add, because it's a little bit of an art as well, because you can have I forget the word, but when there's a combination of so if you have, let's say, TV one week and SEM the other week, but there's some additional factor by having them both together in the same week, so you almost have I forget the technical term, but it's like, instead of like there's some multiplicative effect that you can model in linear regression as well, to say, okay, actually the combination of these adds even more in some ways. So yeah, lots of trial and error doing that. Which again largely depends on how much time you have to turn these around. Impacts how
deep you really get into it,
how fiddly you can get to maybe eke a few more percentage inaccuracy and stuff.
Nice.
But on the digital side is where it gets interesting. So there was and I'm pretty sure this is, if not illegal now, I'm not sure you could actually do it. So there was the media agency I was at was I think they partnered with Google at the time, and Google display activity was run through DoubleClick Campaign Manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was, I'm not sure if that's been renamed since. It's been a while. But
if it's been renamed, it's been in the last couple of years, because it was still DoubleClick in like 2023. So yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, so DoubleClick Campaign Manager is like a platform that I think Google bought, that you could organize display activity in. So you could say, you put in there your creative. So this banner, you want it to run on this date. You want it to be live between these dates. and you want the ratio of creatives. Okay, I want, maybe you have 3 different images. I want 30% of this image, 20% of this image, and 50% of the other image, for example. And then if you set everything up right, once that page loads, I don't know, news.com, then that information of that impression gets sent to Google, and they log it in, like, I guess, their DoubleClick campaign manager reporting system.
PCM stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And they would also track if you can click, if a user clicks it as well. So they also have that information for the display. And what on the other side of that, so how do they know if that campaign's effective? What you would do is you set up a conversion tracker. So you download the relevant thing from DCM, and like Google Analytics, install it on maybe your conversion page.
Yeah.
So thank you for purchasing, and then that page will also fire that conversion. So then on Google's side, in DoubleClick Campaign Manager, they would now know you have maybe saw this impression, saw another impression, click that impression, and then at some point later you converted. But what I guess the thing that we added was, in DoubleClick Campaign Manager, you have a thing called a click tracker. So in the situations where, let's say, there's a default impression, but maybe there's some configuration that doesn't allow that tracking to work, there's a specific piece of, I guess, JavaScript that you can put that sets to fire, that sends the information of that click to Google. Okay, now you've
got that.
Now you've got that.
Data.
But where so the not the tricky part, the value add part is, okay, so now you're looking at the client's website, and the client website, often clients would give you access to Google Tag Manager. So, okay. So now, okay, with Google Tag Manager, you can set certain tags to fire under different conditions. Okay. So, okay, maybe I'll take this click tracker from DoubleClick Campaign Manager. I'll put it in the tag manager on the client's website. I'll call it, let's say, Google Search, but I'll set it to fire in Google Tag Manager when someone has the referrer of Google. Okay, and I'll call this other click tracker paid search. So the referrer is Google, and there's a gclid or some identifier parameter in the URL. So now suddenly you're able to track SEO, organic search, paid search, social visitors, and maybe some video as well. And they all send all those clicks to Google DoubleClick. Okay, so now you go to DoubleClick and you say, give me the, I don't know, impression, click, and conversion report for this website. So now you've got every display ad they've seen and every other way that user has come to the website. So now I've got a list of, okay, they saw display, they saw a video, they came through SEO, and then they converted. So now you can do a full journey analysis of, I don't know, however many conversions they have, of say, okay, SEO contributed this much, this percentage of the time display was first. Because in Google Analytics, what you have is it's often last click, and there's some media channels perform better or worse on last click. So typically, if you're searching for things, you're at the pointy end of a potential conversion journey, even though you may have seen a display ad a week ago, depending on what it is. If it's pizza, maybe it was half an hour. If it's a car, okay, maybe it's a couple of months ago. But going back to the role of a media agency, they're always trying to justify their spends. Yeah. And if you can say, okay, display does work, not in this way when you look at Google Analytics on the last click, but actually when you look at the full journey, half of the journey actually started with a display ad. So it is having a factor of introducing some people to the brand and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's where, like, as a data engineer and data analyst, we really, provide that value, is making sure that those things are in place and that data is being pulled so that we can report into there. I'm gonna pull us back a little bit, a little bit less detail. Let's talk a little bit about. Tell me about what pushed you into data engineering and away from data analysis.
Okay, yeah. So I think it was more a case of being pulled towards data engineering.
Okay.
So I guess my mindset a lot of the time is like, kind of, how can you do certain things better? And it's like, okay, as a data analyst, what does better look like? So that might be faster. Okay, how do we get faster data analysis? Okay, so you probably want to automate some things. So as soon as you're talking about automation, then you're talking about coding stuff. So okay, now you need to learn, if not VBA, then Python. I did it. Probably picked up a little bit of Bash as well.
Yeah.
And then okay, so that's the faster bit, and then it's more reliable as well. So it's like, okay, you did an analysis, and the inevitable question comes up in like 6 months. Okay, can you do this analysis again? And if you just manually clicked around in Excel, it can be a bit tricky to do exactly the same thing.
It's never a one-time ask, is it? People are, I've got this one thing I really need right now, and it's always something that a month from now, hey, can you do that for me again? It's never one time.
Yeah. Rarely is it one time. So yeah, it was that reproducibility aspect of that as well. And then, yeah, if you're working in a team, it's like, how can you kind of maintain consistency between different people potentially doing different parts of the work? So all of those roads kind of lead to code from that sense. And then the other side is, as an analyst and you're delivering more, data is the kind of thing where the more you deliver, the more people want. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, you got me this. Well, can I give you X, can I have Y, Z as well? They might be, okay, a different data source, a different system. And then again, in terms of speed, or maybe even just functionality, like, okay, you got the speed aspect with code, reproducibility, you can do it again. It doesn't take you as long to do it a second time, potentially, if you've got it in code. And then there's you can just do more things in terms of different various analysis using code than you can by hand as well. So it's like all roads are pushing towards, okay, yeah, learning code, getting good at the coding side of things. And then once you're there, you kind of start to think things like, okay, I'm downloading, let's say, this file each week to report on it. And then you start thinking, okay, how best can I organize this? So maybe in 6 months, are they going to do an historical view? So now you're talking about, okay, maybe I add timestamps or some sort of identifier to the data you've downloaded, combining them all together, and now you have a bigger view of that, which is, I guess, a very primitive form of somewhat data modeling. Yeah. So I guess, yeah, it wasn't so much being pushed away from analysis. It was like more
being pulled. You were drawn into
being pulled
data engineering.
as a way of me trying to improve how I'm doing things as an analyst, which just stumbled across, okay, now I'm looking back, well, that's one aspect of data engineering. That's another aspect of data engineering. So, and then the kind of work as well. Yeah, it's just, I find it a lot more fulfilling in the sense that as an analyst, there's a lot of the work can be ethereal is the right word. So you produce an analysis and it's like, okay, maybe someone looks at it for a week, 2 months later it's like, okay, no one really talks about it again. But if you're actually able to build something that lasts, you can actually look back and say, actually, yeah, I built that. And you can look back fondly at the IKEA effect somewhat of having valuing things you built more than perhaps it should be. So yeah, I would say being pulled towards data engineering as a way of being a data analyst. And the other aspect as well is like, the size of data as well. Because if you're like, okay, you're downloading the same file each week, each month, or whatever. Okay, what's the best way of storing that? You do some research. Okay, the best way of storing large amounts of data is in a database. Okay, how do I use a database? What's the best database to use? Maybe not best, appropriate database to use in this circumstance. And then you just bump up against those kinds of questions get raised as you're trying to improve how and why you're doing things.
Very cool. So I apologize. I kind of interrupted your career journey, but I wanted to pull us a little bit out of the GA4 world. There, I was we might lose some people that maybe just beginning and not really that far into it. But I think we're at you're at the digital analyst. And then I know that you went from there to Fox Sports for a little bit, which has been an exciting role.
So that was I don't know. It's like there's brands around, and so Fox Sports is one of the they have all the rights to all the biggest sports in Australia, and they had the Premier League as well at the time. So I was like, I don't know. I'd never worked for a company that big or that well known. I guess. Yeah, you tell your parents, and they're like, "Who do you work for again?" But like that was one way. Like, okay. So I was like, I think I applied, and then I didn't hear anything for a little while. But yeah, managed to get that role, and that was very cool. They had sports on their TVs around the office, and they had like different kind of sports on it all day. So that was pretty cool. But the work I was doing there was largely Adobe Analytics, so it kind of switched from focused on the Google Word to the Adobe. So they're probably the two biggest players when it comes to enterprise digital analytics tooling. So that took a bit of getting used to. But surprisingly, that role ended up being a lot of, let's say, dashboard and BI, because not long after I started there, I think I get the impression it was a golf deal where as the CEO of Dermo maybe knew the CEO of Fox Sports, because he just came in one day and was like, "Hey, we've got this new tool. You have to make use of it." Like, oh, okay. But no, actually, Dermo turned out to be, it's a fantastic tool. So it's like so it's a business intelligence platform, but as part of it, it has, let's say, data connections. It has data manipulation or transformation, and it has visualization in it as well. So at the time, and I'm sure it's probably grown, it had 300 different data connectors to different platforms. So you could pull in Adobe Analytics, Google Analytics, Google Sheets, data from Dropbox. Yeah, pretty much Fivetran almost, or a Stitch was incorporated into a BI tool, if you think of it that way.
Yeah.
They also had, which I made use of at the time, drag and drop data transformations. So you could say, select these rows, maybe remove duplicates, do some math and adding or separating these columns, a bit of string formatting, and then each of those was like a box you drag, do something, plug into the next box, and then at the end you have kind of an output data set.
Nice. So similar to building pipelines in
that's what I was
MES.
doing.
Yeah. You were doing that even then with Fox.
Yeah, so that was interesting. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Didn't know any SQL at the time. I was like, oh, that sounds a little bit too complicated for me. I'll stick with the drag and drop. But
what was the
actually,
name of that tool? Did you say Domo?
Domo, yeah. So they're based out of the US in where
For those of you that are watching, I'm gonna put that link in to that platform in the chat here. But it does look like a cool tool. I mean, it's got, like you said, it's got the data viz tied into it, and I mean, it's got all those pieces, and it's
got all the pieces.
That's really cool.
It's pretty good. I would say it's probably, if you're okay, if I explain the situation in Fox. So me as a single analyst using Domo in a period of, let's say, 6 months to a year.
Mm-hmm.
So I was supporting the entire team of product owners, digital product owners for Fox Sports, so across website and app at the time. So I was able to build visualizations to enable self-serve for a lot of use cases. Yeah. So it was, I guess, prior to that, people would log into Adobe. They might have a couple of reports set up that they look at. But with Domo, it kind of removed if I knew what they were looking at, I could create the segment. Okay, you're only looking at this. So there wasn't that confusion, because it was just like, oh, does this, because with web, it's like, oh, does this include that page? Does this exclude that? I was able to build that all on the Domo side with all the filters necessary and say, this is what it is. So there's removed a lot of confusion. In Domo, you can also, it has the timings. So you can say, oh, refresh this each day. So now everyone logs in each week, day, whenever, whatever frequency they like, and they can look at the data that's pertinent to them. And me as a single analyst in a year was able to support, I would say, maybe 15 product owners with if you have there's a hierarchy of needs is the wrong way, but fundamental kind of just how is my product going?
Yeah.
Because you get a lot of those questions. So, okay, you build the reporting to answer that. So now you're on to the next set of, okay, this is questions that are just generally more interesting than, okay, how many page views did my section get? It's like, oh, my page views actually dropped. Oh, why? It looks like maybe SEO or something. You can have a bit better conversation. So it's a really empowering tool for maybe, I would say, maybe a few hundred if you're organizing it well. I think if you're for very large organizations, it's very easy to get
you start needing a Tableau or a Power BI at that point beyond
potentially point. There's just the complexity needed to scale to that many people just becomes something
becomes difficult
else. But no, that was actually a fun thing to do. So I was like, oh, what's this thing? I thought it was going to maybe be 10% of my time. Ended up being most of my time, and I really enjoyed it.
It looks really cool. So from there, you moved into a consultant role, a BI consultant role. Is that right? With
it was Panalysis. Yeah, I think they've since been bought to Incubator, but it was called Panalysis at the time. And so my role there was I was like the principal Domo consultant. So they had
So you got to take this and move
Yeah,
into that consultancy role. I mean, that's pretty cool.
yeah. So they had a few clients who maybe used Domo, and it's like whenever they needed work done, okay, I'm the guy. Jump in, build whatever they need, and it's like it's interesting the difference between consultancy and in-house, because like in-house, if someone asks for something, you could be like, yeah, I'm not sure, I don't think that's the best. But like when it's consultancy, it's like, I really don't think this is a good idea, but you asked for it, so I'll make it for you.
Right. Yeah, you're a little bit from a consultant standpoint. You're a little bit more at the whim of of the
Yeah.
person you're doing the consultancy, the business you're doing the consultancy with. You could try and kind of persuade them one way or the other sometimes, but yeah, you're often just all right. That's what you asked for. So this is
Yeah.
what you asked for. Yeah.
So yeah, doing a bit. I guess mostly Domo work. But I think that started to dry up a bit. So I was involved in some of the other streams of work that the consultancy was doing. So that it was a thread through my career is Google. So very much a Google analytics shop, but they also provided reporting and stuff on the other side. So I guess there's where I really had my first interaction with GCP,
Oh yeah.
Google Cloud Platform. So they had um, a client who had their reporting through, I think, a Cloud SQL instance. So they had custom scripts. So it was like a franchise. Let's say it's a franchise. They had maybe 100, 200 different franchise stores,
Yeah.
each with their own website.
Mm-hmm.
So this agency had built a script that goes through all the Google Analytics from each of the franchise, combine them into a single view, and then that would went into a Tableau, and then that would be shared back with them. So that was
It's a
very
cool
interesting.
project. Yeah.
And that was in terms of the stack. So it was a Cloud SQL, and I think the scripts ran through App Engine.
Okay. Yeah.
So you could set up the timings. But yeah, that was like so they got a technical person to do that, and I was like, I guess moving in that direction, but maybe not to that degree.
To that point,
So it was one of those where I was like, oh, so now I'm in charge of reporting. It's like, okay, how do I know if like the scripts failed or not? Because it was like running in the App Engine, and I think it failed silently. So like the only time you knew is like when you load up the Tableau,
and
you
data's
know,
missing. Yeah.
and the data's there, or like some part of it is missing, and then you're like, because it wasn't just one script, there were maybe 5 different scripts. So you're like, okay, which one of these 5 didn't work? So then you have to jump in and make some changes, and then added a lot of I'd say not monitoring, kind of monitoring. Have you heard of I don't know if you say product, say healthchecks.io?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, if
That's
it's
monitoring. Yeah.
so if a script, I'd put because you can do, so that's a tool where you send a ping or like a request, and it will say, okay, this reached, and they'll log it on their side. So I did one at the start and then one at the end. So I'll just look to
Make
say,
sure that
okay,
there was
did
that
it
they were
finish?
both
Did it
there.
not finish?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like average time. It gives you those cool stuff. But that was like, the first kind of foray into, I guess, monitoring and GCP and stuff. So that was an interesting experience.
And there's a bunch of tools like that out there. Like there's Datadog that'll do a lot of similar stuff, right?
Yeah.
Kind of that monitoring of, okay, this workflow started or this pipeline started at this time. It took this amount of time, and tell you like how many records were moved during that period of time too. And like you said, that way when something silently fails, then you still see, oh crap, no data moved here. and you could go through and investigate that. But yeah, those tools become important.
Yeah, they sure do. Yeah, so that was that, and then I guess that brings us up to what, 2021. Yeah, to Woolies. Woolies X is like what they call the support office of Woolworths, the supermarket.
Okay.
I think since it was recently kind of brought back into the Woolworths umbrella, so it's not actually Woolies X anymore. But yeah, so I got made redundant during COVID, so that was kind of a heart in mouth moment where you wondering, because everyone basically put hiring freeze on, and there wasn't many opportunities. But yeah, moved there as a digital analyst, again using Adobe. But yeah, managed to move into an engineering role here. I think so doing a lot of Adobe, and then the opportunity, how I kind of transitioned. So I think in the previous role in Analysis was kind of sparked my interest in GCP, because I was like, oh, I'd been doing actually the data transformation stuff in Domo, or the data ingestion, all of it in Domo. And I was like, okay, this GCP looks like a much broader way of actually doing that kind of thing, more flexible and stuff. And plus, Woolworths is pretty much a Google shop, so they use Workspace as well.
Okay.
Google Workspace, and then GCP. So then the opportunity came up to do ingest Adobe Analytics clickstream data. So that's at the time, all of the reporting and analysis was done using the Adobe Analytics interface, which is great. That's what I was doing at Fox Sports. But there are some limitations in terms of the kind of analysis you can do in the interface. So some things like, if you have a dimension that you pass a number into, like Adobe Analytics just won't let you do math on that. And things like that. So getting the clickstream data was kind of the first data engineering project that I did at Woolworths. And I guess it kind of got me in as a data engineer through the back door, because once that was set up, I kind of said that, okay, it's here, but it's like not officially supported, because I'm still doing all this data analysis stuff. It's like, it'd be great to move into a data engineering position, so this could be fully and officially supported. Because I'm sure you've come across the situation where maybe you make some data and it's like, okay, this person finds it useful. Okay, this person tells this person that it's useful. And then before you know it, you've got maybe 50, or depending on the size of the company, a sizable number of the people actually using and make use of that data. And then it's like, well, no, we have to have this data now, and it needs to be
it always
production ready.
Becomes mission critical, and it was always meant to be some just kind of scratch pad of with some conceptual kind of piece of data. I'll say that's also how, like, business units somehow you become there's people sometimes within a specific business unit that will do something like that, and then all of a sudden, like, they become a data engineer because they've conglomerated all of this disparate data sources together for the business, or for their business unit. And then it becomes, like you said, one person tells another person tells another person. All of a sudden, you've got some AVP using this report that you created for your project manager, and now you're the data engineer for half the business, because you created this one thing. And That's how some people get into it even. But yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was fun, a fun thing to do, and it was like that used Airflow, cloud storage. So yeah, the GCP, and then in Woolworths, so it's pretty much so it's Google Shop. They use Workspace in GCP. Within GCP, the main tools that where the data lives is in BigQuery. They have, because of there's lots of teams in Woolworths, so each team might have one or more projects inside Google Cloud Platform. So that's kind of how that's managed. And then yeah, within the projects, people have the BigQuery data sets and that kind of thing. But I guess so. I did that maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I was like, okay, I really need to push for this data engineering role. So I was speaking to some people in the business who kind of led data engineers in that space about how to officially transition. And they basically gave me advice of, okay, what you need is the Google Cloud Platform Professional Data Engineering Certificate.
Okay.
And you need to show yeah, and then that's how you show and then as well as that, show proficiency in kind of the main tools that they were using. So that was BigQuery, Google Cloud Storage, Cloud Composer, which is their managed version of Airflow, and I think Cloud Functions at the time. Was there Cloud Functions? Maybe. So yeah, so that led me on the kind of the learning path. So that's when I decided to get the GCP data engineering certificate, and built a couple of projects using Airflow and BigQuery and stuff. And then actually it did all that, and then it was probably a little while longer until I was transitioning to a data engineer, just because the size of all of us, people can things move a bit slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And what else do I have to say? Yeah, so I think that's the main thing. But in terms of, so during that time as well, when I was upskilling, so I tried to keep track of the things that I was learning. So I have a blog, marquinsmith.com, and then I have on a subdomain, I think it's Journey to Data Engineering, where I was keeping track of all the things that I was learning. So I'm not sure if you've found this, Chris, but data is kind of one of those spaces where it can be somewhat difficult to demonstrate your proficiency in certain things, because the working with data in a business is almost by definition confidential. And it's like, oh, okay, you look around, like graphic designers have portfolios where they can, shop it around. But like, what do data people have really? It's a bit tricky.
It is. It's super, from a data engineering particularly. You know, as a data analyst, you could kind of mock up and fake some data, I guess, to make a aesthetically pleasing report that, or you could go out and grab some data sets. But how do you, to your point, as a data engineer, how do you demonstrate that I could build an efficient pipeline, right, or workflow? And like, it comes out when you're in an interview, right? As people are asking you questions, and they'll kind of fish out whether you're, kind of BSing them, or if you are, actually know what you're talking about. But yeah, how do you build a portfolio as a data engineer? You do some side projects maybe, and throw some things up in Git, and maybe some Python scripts, but you can't put you could put like the XML, I guess, of an ADF pipeline in to a Git repository, but then somebody's got to pull it and load it, and it's not going to have the data sources. And I mean, it's not, there's no feasible way of realistically, building a portfolio as a data engineer. I think I am definitely open to anybody that comes on here and listens to this and has an idea about how to do that. I am happy to hear that perspective. But yeah, from my point of view, it's always been, like you said, you can't. You're kind of at the whim of, you get in the interview, you get in front of somebody, and you explain to them how you do things and how you would, make things more efficient or change things around, and how you do your data modeling. And you explain things like star schema and medallion architecture, or how to physically do things in like ADF or BigQuery or AWS Glue. And then they know by the way that you're talking about how you're doing things that, okay, this person has at least used this before, and they seem to know what they're talking about. But you can't put any of that anywhere. It's all proprietary information that you're working with, even if you could potentially put it somewhere. So yeah, I agree.
It's a tricky one. So like the approach I took was like, so okay, I need to get the certification. So there's almost like two audiences, and you have to cater to simultaneously. So there's a technical and not non-technical. So there's a technical who might be the team lead of a potential data engineering team that you're hiring for. And then there's like the HR, maybe screeners, or people just looking for competent data professionals to be able to work with. So like, at least for the second one of those, like that's where I think where certification can help.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's a big signal. Like if you've got whichever certification from AWS, Azure, or Google, is like, okay, this person at least has passed some level of knowledge that they do. So someone at any company maybe doesn't even have to trust you. They just, okay, the bar that Google have set or Azure have set, they've passed it type thing. And then I guess the other one that straddles both is at least for portfolio projects, it should really, at least in my perspective, have a dashboard on the end of it for if it's a data project, because dashboard is where you kind of lure people in. So, okay, now I've got your attention. Let me explain how the data got in there. Okay, I use X, Y, Z. Maybe I used Streamlit to input the data. I use Google Sheets feeding into BigQuery, or so, whatever you use, Airflow. At least then, like you've got their attention, and then you can have something further to the details. At least that was my approach.
Yeah, and I put your link down in the comments here in the chat. But yeah, I really like the way that you've set up your site here with your mini projects. And I'm going to share real quick if you don't mind.
Yep, sure.
Share screen. There we go. So I mean, I think this is great. From the home page, you kind of get just a summary and some titles of the different projects that you've done. I really like the way that you've got your about page set up with kind of your professional history, some categories here, some recent posts. And then you've got your mini projects here, which, you've got some great dashboards here with, your Bitcoin project, really showing some Bitcoin price. Bitcoin prices even through. I guess this is still running because it's got December 24 in here.
Yeah, it updates daily, that one. Yeah.
So awesome.
I think if you look at the projects, there's some other dashboards. I think the Tarantino film dashboard, that was an interesting one to do. So for people listening, there's 538, which is, they do a lot of data journalism. So they have a repository on GitHub with, let's say, lots of different types of data sets, lots of different types of subjects. So I picked out this one. It's a Tarantino film data set. It's been a while since I built this. I'm not exactly sure like the structure of the data and all the fields, but like, yeah, you can see how many words are in a film and how many people died in each of his films. But there was another data set which I probably haven't included here. It's like an alcohol one, which shows you which countries kind of drink the most and which ones drink most wine versus beers versus spirits. So that's, yeah, the 538 GitHub is a good place if you're just looking for data to play around with and do interesting things with.
That's awesome. Yeah, this is really cool. You've got swear words spoken and kind of how far into the movie the earliest one is. Unique swear words spoken in film. I mean, this is interesting and engaging and fun enough that somebody would be like, oh, that's really neat. But yeah, I really like the way you have this set up with because then you have at least some visuals here, right? Like you said, from a data engineering perspective, it's hard to demonstrate to a non-technical audience sometimes what that looks like. But I also like you have this SQL cheat sheet in here with some stuff, and you've got 20 pages, but it's I really like this, really straightforward of, querying data from a table, from multiple tables. So, this is a great resource for people just getting into SQL. But Docker file cheat sheets, for those of you that may be watching that you've not gotten into Docker yet, Docker's a big one to get into. Something that kind of after you've got a good foundation of SQL and maybe a cloud platform, jump out there and take a look at Docker, I think, and start learning that, because there's so many use cases where I've used Docker over the years, especially when I was in AWS, taking using a Python script and putting it into a Docker container, and then taking that and using Elastic services within AWS to run those scripts. And there's tools in GCP and Azure as well, to do that. But the Elastic resources in AWS are really useful for that. But Docker is a good one.
Yeah, for sure. It's like my view of Docker is like it's a cheat code in terms of being able to do stuff, because as you said, you just write a Python script, you have the dependencies. Okay, you put in a Docker container, and now it does whatever, and you don't really have to think about anything else. And the flexibility as well, because it runs on, as you said, you can run it locally, because by nature they're containers. They run on each of the clouds, and it's just
throw it in just a simple Ubuntu image somewhere and run it within your Linux container, like an EC2 container somewhere in in AWS.
Yeah, one of the, I guess, learn once, use everywhere type things I came across was once I figured out how to run a Streamlit app in a Docker container. I was like, oh, off to the races we go, because it's like now you can host it and connect it. So yeah, Streamlit is like a Python library that allows you to build interactive dashboards and I guess front ends just using only Python code, but you have the interactivity. It's like sometimes you want to share something with people. It's like, okay, where do I run it? Becomes the next question.
Yeah.
So yeah, you put in a Docker container, spin up Cloud Run, share the link. Okay, boom, off to the races. And it's, yeah, what can you do with a Streamlit app is what can you do in Python, pretty much. So yeah, I definitely recommend.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I apologize. I've kept you over. I don't want to. I want to respect your time, but
I'm good if you want to go some more.
yeah, and we've got a few people on. So if anybody out there has any questions, pop them in the chat. You know, we'd love to hear from you, and let us know what questions that you have about moving from an analyst role into a data engineering role, or even moving into an analyst role. I know a lot of you may be just looking to get into data at all, and I think that I think we both have experience doing that. You know, just breaking into any type of data role. Uh, maybe not as recent as like yesterday, but we both had to find our way to break into data roles in our careers, and so yeah, pop your questions in the chat. Let us know what you got, and we'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, well, we'll do that. I'll talk, I guess, a little bit about some of the aspects of how I tried to learn some of the more data engineering skills. So I guess I figured out pretty early that, yeah, it's the skills you need for data engineering are like Python, a little bit of Linux, GCP, at least in my case, that made sense. So it's like, what kind of resources did I use? I pretty much took the approach of try and learn through osmosis. So like I might not post too much on Twitter, but I am on there quite a lot. So yeah, just curating my followers. So I try and follow people who seem to say coherent things about data and working with data on Twitter. Podcasts is a good one. I listen to some good ones. Talk Python to me is a good one for Python. But there's lots I can reel off. Talk Python to me, Python Bytes, Storytelling with Data, Analytics Power Hour is a good one. And then for data engineering specifically, there's a data engineering podcast, or also the Joe Reese show, who kind of like just rants, was it's like a insider's perspective on data. And it's like, at least with the Talk Python, I remember the first few episodes that I listened to, I think maybe I understood, I'll be generous to myself, 10% of the kind of stuff they were talking about and the terms, because I wasn't, I guess, they talk about maybe some Python internal stuff. And I was like, I was coming from, my maths background, working in Excel, and now I'm listening to Talk Python and they're talking about iterables and all that good stuff. And I was just like, okay, I'll keep going down this road, but yeah, I don't really understand much of what they're talking about. So that was a good part, because it's also kind of keeping you aware of new libraries and packages in the landscape.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's like, you can kind of gauge it where, okay, there's a certain threshold of if you hear something enough, okay, maybe you should give it a go. So like a few weeks ago, I did I think a fresh install on my computer. I was like, okay, let me try UV for this one, which for people who might not know is like it's a newer way of managing libraries in Python. So instead of pip install, you might UV install, and it's, I think, faster way of installing and handles dependencies between certain libraries. I'm going down
And
a rabbit hole, so I'll pull out.
I think it's Rust based too. I think that's what
Yeah,
makes it faster is that it's Rust based, and so there's some efficiencies that are gained there. Yeah.
yeah. What else? Oh, I didn't mention. As an analyst and somewhat newer data engineer, like the business knowledge is critical. So I think, at least for me, the Acquired podcast has been a great resource just to understand, because they talk about businesses from a high level strategy, kind of share price. So it's like, if you ever want to get close to what maybe the CEO or the C-suite is thinking, the Acquired podcast is a very good one for that. Like, at least for me at the moment, working in retail, they had an episode on Walmart and Costco, and they were very informative in terms of helping me understand the landscape of retail.
I think, to that point, it's important to understand whatever the industry is that you're in, because it helps you to curate the data that you're ingesting, and it helps to sometimes it'll help you to kind of anticipate how that data is going to be used so that you could better position it for that usage. Definitely, as an analyst, I think it's important to understand those things and what's going on in those industries. To, like you said, that business knowledge, that domain knowledge is super important. Not just in retail, but I'm sure you saw it heavily when you were in media too. Um, and it's super important in healthcare. Like, if you break into healthcare and have that domain knowledge, you're pretty much like set for life, because if you enjoy that particular domain, right? But you see senior positions of, even data engineers and data analysts for healthcare companies, like all over the place, and every one of them say that it requires you to have that domain experience. Like, there's not a whole lot of data roles out there that say, I'm going to require you to have experience in this specific industry, but healthcare does. But it's no matter which industry it is that you're in, it helps to have that domain knowledge, like you're saying. So I like this Acquired one, like you said, for kind of what's going on in different markets and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
We do have a question from the audience. Gene's asking, do you use AI in your job?
Yeah, I use AI. So again, Google's Woolworths being a Google shop, we've got the use of Gemini, the, I guess, paid version. So that's pretty good. We also do have, because of the size of Woolworths, that you do end up with some teams using some different tools. So we also do have Copilot, but I haven't ended up using that as much. I think I like to flesh out my idea and then have a conversation. So I'll normally have it open in a tab, and like, I normally think of the strategy. So if I say, I know I need to update all these rows in the table, I can't do it in one chunk. I need to process day by day. I might go to Gemini to say, actually, how do I do this? How do I run these SQL queries in parallel? Rather than relying on, I guess, beginning to write the code and then hitting tab. I like to, okay, what should my approaches be? Like multi-threading, multi-process. Yeah, I prefer, a different window. That's how I'm kind of using at the minute. They do have some further integrations, I guess. Like, so with the Gemini, that say things like, "Oh, it'll help you build PowerPoint presentations and help you write documents." The most useful cases for me is, helping me figure out how to approach a problem, and the if you have a meeting summarization, that's very handy as well.
Yeah. And I'll say that for Gemini particularly, like if you have a YouTube video that you may be looking at for some type of learning, or anything, but specifically for some, it does a good job for learning type things. But with Gemini, it has the YouTube plugin, and you can put in a link for a video, and it will summarize that video for you and kind of pull out the high points, which is a really cool use. Like if you're looking to use it to learn, but like you, I use. I'm heavy into Databricks right now, with the project that I'm working on, and like you said, determining when it's a good time to use that parallelism and to run things in parallel, or when it's a good time to use some other piece of PySpark within that notebook, and sometimes it'll give you kind of a jump start too. And I'll say that also within Databricks now, which is just another alternative for AI that that you don't have in other things. It's not Copilot and it's not Gemini. It just says Toggle Assistant, but I forget what this is called. But it has its own AI that will it's like an advanced IntelliSense. It's very interesting, but it does a good job. It gets you, like all the other AIs, it gets you like 60% of the way there, and then you still have to update the rest. You still have to, have some type of intervention. It's never quite exactly right.
Yeah. Cool. One thing I didn't mention on the AI was that, for learning, it's very good at explaining concepts. Like, so for me, as part of becoming a data engineer, like you have to learn certain computer science principles. Because I didn't do computer science at university, so I was like, okay, I have to learn big O notation and all of those kind of different kinds of sorts and stuff. So it's like it was very good in explaining those and helping me understand. Because you can ask it a question like, explain, I don't know, log n notation, like, and then you just explain it like I'm 5 at the end, and it will give you the most straightforward explanation.
Yeah.
Which is very good for learning. Like, I feel like if it's an established subject and you want to get to around maybe undergrad level of knowledge on it, like, asking the AIs and working through any uncertainties there, that can get you very far.
I think I like it for that, and I like it for brainstorming. Like I said, the coding, generally, if you ask it a question, it might get you like 60-70% of the way there. But there's always still going to be some type of manual intervention that has to happen. Plus, you don't. I'm going to say this because I said the other piece. Do not copy and paste your code from whatever your business is into any of the AIs directly without making sure that you are protecting your company's resources. Important piece when you're using AI, I think, that you're not putting any of your company's proprietary information or any type of secrets like API keys or any type of credentials out there into the AI verse. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely don't
Definitely
want to do that.
lots of potential for AI, but caution there too.
Yeah, I wish there was an AI when I was trying to learn SQL. That would have been a help. I missed that train, unfortunately. But yeah, I think for those who might have been following the journey earlier, I was quite late to SQL in my data journey. Maybe yeah, just the last, I think 4 or 5 years. And actually, like my opinion, strongly held now, is like you should probably learn SQL through something like SQLite or even maybe a DuckDB. So if I talk from my experience, so I knew MATLAB. There's no jobs for MATLAB. All the analyst roles were SQL. I was like, oh, I better learn SQL. Okay, get SQL for Dummies as you do. You're looking through, and then the first couple of chapters was, oh, here's how you set up a server for I didn't even know what database engine it was, and that was I think a barrier that was a little bit too high for me at the moment with I guess pre YouTube, pre really the whole social sharing around how to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That was just like so I guess I parked SQL for maybe six or so years and then came back around. But yeah, I think SQLite, and I'm doing a course on that at the moment. Actually, it's almost like, at least from my history of being an analyst, I realized I could have done almost all of that using SQLite, like all the analysis, and then in that way it kind of builds in while you're learning SQL kind of data management because you're inserting into tables. And all that kind of you get the database guarantees and stuff. There's no like missing cell. Well, I guess you can still have missing data.
Good.
But yeah, so that's that.
That's a good and that's a good point too. Is that so many of those things you have to, when you're learning SQL, you either have to download and install a server, and start all that up, which could be significant. A significant load, and something that for a data engineer analyst you're never going to ever have to do again, right? I mean, once you do it, unless it's for some type of learning purpose, you're not going to have a job where you're installing a server, right? I mean, that's just not going to happen. But you do have to figure out, like you said, you'd use SQLite. Postgres is one of those easier to install servers. SQL Server Express is a little bit easier than some of the others. Oracle is absolutely the hardest. But yeah, SQLite's a good one, and like the DuckDB more recently is a good one to use. One that we didn't have, 25 years ago to practice on it. Heck, I mean, if you're just learning SQL and just barely getting into it, even potentially using like Microsoft Access, if you don't want to learn how to install something, I think is not the worst route to go. But I like the SQLite and the DuckDB recommendations.
Yeah, they're pretty powerful tools because I like the approach of kind of isolated reports. So what I was thinking was like, if you have, so I've already put a Streamlit app in Docker. Well, now you just bundle a SQLite database in the Docker image, and now you've got kind of that encapsulated reporting potential. You build a couple of reports, and now like you've removed a lot of security concerns because maybe it's not reaching out directly to your cloud data warehouse. You remove the latency of actually getting the data, the load on your data warehouse. Yeah, if you can bundle it all as one, and there are some. It's an interesting approach. I think there's observable and maybe evidence. Won't show JavaScript frameworks, but kind of take that approach of, okay, we'll get the data and then we'll bundle it rather than having that live connection, which is an interesting approach.
I'm just I'm putting some of the links to go out and get DuckDB if anybody's interested, and the link to Docker down there. Been trying to kind of put the links to some of the things that we've been talking about in the chat for those of you that are watching. But again, trying to be respectful of everybody's time. If anybody has any final questions, I know for people on the East Coast, it may be getting a little late, and I'm sure that Marquin wants to get on with his day and has other things and spend time with his family. So if you have any other final questions, pop them in the chat now. And aside from that, I think that we're going to wrap it up here. Do you have any final words for everybody?
I don't know. Well, I guess, yeah, aspiring data engineers, yeah, keep going, keep plugging. It's a complex field. Don't, I guess, let the people hiring make the call if you're not at the level, or maybe just use it to gather information. So if you don't think you may be quite ready, still apply, get the feedback, and then now you've got something to help you grow.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you that want to reach out and connect, I will put your LinkedIn in the description of the video, along with several of the links. We've talked about a lot of things, talked about a bunch of resources this evening, and I'll be sure to put those links in the description of the video, as well as a lot of them are in the chat. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Marquin, sorry, for talking with us tonight and sharing your experience. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chris. It's been a blast.
Awesome. Thank you very much, and y'all have a good night.
Cheers.